Have you ever looked at a perfect eclair or a beautiful light-as-air cream puff and just thought, there is no way I could ever make that? Well, if that's you, you are in the right place. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on Pâte choux, the amazing, and it's surprisingly simple dough that's the foundation for some of the most famous pastries out there.
So let's just jump right in with a little bit of a riddle. What on earth do golden, puffy cream puffs have in common with, well, little cabbages? It sounds a little weird, right? But I promise the answer to that question is the key to understanding this whole thing.
And the answer? Well, the first big clue is hiding right there in the name itself.
Okay, so pâte choux, and you say it like pâte à choux, literally translates from French to cabbage paste. Why? Because when you pike these little rustic mounds of dough and bake them, they puff up and look just like tiny little cabbages. How charming is that? It's such a perfect name for a really, really clever dough. Now, I know it sounds super French, super fancy, and probably super complicated, but here is the secret. It is not. Seriously, forget all the hours of folding and chilling you might associate with things like croissants. Pâte choux actually comes together in just a few minutes, right on your stovetop. It's not about some impossible technique. It's just about understanding the simple chemistry that's at work.
Here's what makes this dough so unique. It's actually cooked twice. The first cook happens before it even sees the oven. It's done right on the stove, and this is where we build the entire foundation for that incredible puff we're looking for. It all starts with bringing your liquid, usually water or milk, along with your fat and salt to a really rapid rolling boil. And rolling is the key word here. That intense heat creates an emulsion, basically forcing the fat to break up and disperse all through the water instead of just sitting on top. This is so important because it ensures every single particle of flour gets coated. Then, and this part feels a little wild, you take it off the heat and dump in all the flour at once.
So you start stirring, and as you stir over the heat, you're going to see something kind of magical happen. The whole thing goes from this messy, shaggy clump into a smooth, cohesive paste that literally forms a ball and pulls away cleanly from the sides of the pan. The second you see that happen, that's your green light. Stage 1 is complete.
All right, with that dough ball formed, we are ready for what is probably the most important step of all, adding the eggs. This is where we go from a stiff, cooked paste to a silky, pipeable dough.
But hold on, don't just dump the eggs in. This is so important. You have to let that paste cool down first to about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's any hotter, you're just going to end up with scrambled eggs, and nobody wants that. Then you beat them in, but one at a time. You have to wait until each egg completely disappears into the dough before you even think about adding the next one. Trust me, that little bit of patience is what creates that perfect, smooth, stable paste. So what's the perfect final texture we're looking for? It's all about this beautiful balance. You want a paste that's smooth, it's glossy, it's moist. It needs to be stiff enough to hold its shape when you pipe it, but not so stiff that it's dry or rough. The classic test? Lift up your beater or spoon. The dough should slowly fall off in a beautiful V shape. When you see that V, you've hit the sweet spot. So, we've got the how-to down, but what about the why? What is the force that inflates these little mounds of dough into these incredible, light, hollow shells? Well, the science behind it is actually really, really cool and surprisingly simple.
Unlike almost every other baked good out there, the magic here doesn't come from baking soda or baking powder or yeast. There are absolutely no chemical leaveners in this recipe. That huge, dramatic puff comes from one single, powerful source: steam. That's it. All that liquid we put in at the beginning turns to steam in that hot oven, and it expands so violently that it forces the dough up and out. A really great way to wrap your head around this concept is to think about popovers. Both pâte choux and popovers use a high-protein or strong flour that creates this really elastic structure that's perfect for trapping that expanding steam. The only real difference is that pâte choux is a thick dough, and popover batter is, well, a thin batter. But the physics, the science that makes them rise, it's exactly the same. Okay, time for the grand finale, the baking. This is where all that careful prep work pays off and comes to life. And getting that perfect, tall, stable puff means using a very specific two-step temperature approach in the oven. First, you start hot, really hot. We're talking a blistering 425 degrees Fahrenheit. This powerful initial blast of heat is what causes that super fast conversion of water into steam. It creates that explosive puff that gives the pastry its signature shape. But as soon as they've hit their maximum height, you immediately drop the oven temperature down to 375. At this point, the goal is no longer about expansion, it's about stabilization.
This gentler heat finishes the job, drying out the inside and creating a firm, crisp shell that is strong enough to not collapse on you when it cools.
Which brings us to every baker's #1 fear, the dreaded collapse, the sad, deflated puff. The key to avoiding that is just to bake them long enough. They need to be totally firm and dry and sound hollow when you give them a little tap. Pulling them out of the oven too soon is the most common mistake. And then let them cool down slowly, away from any cold drafts. A sudden temperature shock is their absolute worst enemy.
So there you have it, the simple science behind a perfect pâte choux. See, it's not some impossible French magic, it's just a really clever technique that knows how to harness the power of steam. And now that you know the secret, the only question left is, what are you going to bake first? Are you going to go for classic cream puffs? Maybe some elegant eclairs? Or hey, what about some savory, cheese-filled gougères? The kitchen is all yours.